Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 3 Questions. Super excited for this episode. Today I have a good friend, Frank Lago, and just join our conversation as we talk about real estate talk. So Frank, thanks for joining.
First and foremost, thank you for having me there. It's a pleasure.
Oh, of course, man. Thanks for joining. I know we first met a month now ago, a couple weeks back. With George, our great mutual friend.
Absolutely. We met a few weeks ago, but it's been a pleasure interacting with you since.
Yeah, man. For sure, 100%. And I want to have you on this podcast because you have a great knowledge of city knowledge, government knowledge, and also real estate knowledge. And tying those two both in is, a great skill, as we talked about earlier, that is, not a lot of people have that privilege.
Absolutely. Right? It's something I think has been pivotal in my real estate career. Just having the knowledge of government and what government does and why they do it is so important. I encourage everybody to be part of the process and be involved in their local governments.
Yeah, man. And tell our viewers what's your background like? Who is Frank Lago?
Oh wow! So who is Frank Lago? Well, born and raised in Miami.
Okay.
I went to schools all throughout my life here, including university at FIU, and that's when I started to kind of take an interest in government and real estate. At the time I was in FIU, and I was doing my bachelor's at the time, but I got hired to work for an urban think tank called the Metropolitan Center. And there what they did is they provided services to municipalities. And one of the services that they provided was redevelopment, right? They would do economic development studies in the city and basically do consulting services on how the city could gain more revenue in terms of economic development. And one of those areas that they covered was zoning, right? At the end of the day, a city makes its money through ad valorem taxes, most of their money. So if a city can't find better use for their properties, let's say the city's residential, and no one sells their property, they're stuck getting X amount of dollars for residential property. So one of the ways that the Metropolitan Center helped cities was consulting with them and saying, okay, this area here of the city we think is a better use would be commercial, right? This is what we think you could do in this area, and they would do renderings and they would do projections. And that's kind of what opened my eyes to real estate. The possibility of creating something completely new that wasn't there, almost visionary. Yeah. So that's kind of my introduction into government/real estate at the same time.
Yeah. So, you graduated high school from FIU.
I so graduated with a bachelor's from FIU, went to the Metropolitan Center. I was doing my master's in public administration. And at this point, the City of Sweetwater was, I'm going to date myself, but this was back in 04, 05. And they were in the process of going some aggressive redevelopment. FIU wanted to become a college town. They were landlocked. They had no more areas to grow into. So Sweetwater, being just across the street, was a natural fit. They had recently made up the decision to boost student enrollment. I believe it was to 58,000 students at the time by 2025, whatever the date was. So since they were landlocked, they looked at us to provide housing solutions for their students. Metropolitan got involved. I got involved in that consulting, and sure enough, the city hired me to become a member of their government back then. So that's kind of how I got into government, right? The City of Sweetwater was a very blue-collar city, and to a certain point it still is in certain areas, but it's changed a lot over the years. So they were in the midst of trying to figure it out. What I didn't know at the time is that the City of Sweetwater back then was 92% residential, and they had no tax base whatsoever. And imagine having to have a police department, a planning department, a building department, public works, and just general services overall. There's not enough money, right? So part of it was trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? Is the infrastructure there? And the second part, which is actually the hardest part is selling that to the community, right? Because, you know, how would you like it? Like, hey, Greg, we're going to build a 15-story building next to your house, right? But it's going to work. It's going to be great. You're going to love it, you know?
I don't know how I feel about that.
And that was kind of the commitment we had to do.
Yeah.
It was a series of years of selling to the residents, hey, the city can no longer remain this way. It has to grow. How could we do something good that provides the resources that the city needs? In essence, also something that's acceptable to the neighbors, to the residents that live there. Okay. You know, so it was a lot of negotiation with just the town overall. Okay. And that's the hardest part about redevelopment, because, you know, if it didn't come down to the residents, everybody would be for it. Yeah, we want more tax space, sure. You know, let's change our zoning, let's change our land use in this area to allow for us to get more ad valorem taxes. Easy. But then the residents vote those politicians out of office, right? So it's a give and take.
So you get hired as chief of staff?
I'm hired as something.
Okay.
Who knows what I was hired as.
Yet.
And then I rose through the ranks. I was chief of staff. I think it took like a year.
Okay.
I become chief of staff, and you know the main mission is to sell this, to finalize what's known as amending the comprehensive master plan. Right.
So as your chief of staff now, it's your responsibility to help this vision of the city of Sweetwater to do an effort to redevelop all this land and eventually annex more land.
Well,
so what are some?
Let's talk about that. So two things were going on. So one of them was just the redevelopment of the 109th corridor, right? So everything from 109th to 107th, from let's call it the canal, right, all the way to Flagler. So that's what we envisioned would be the college area. Aside from that, that was going to take time. We needed help. We needed help in terms of more money, more resources. So the city, when I first got there, attempted to annex the Dolphin Mall, and we failed. We actually we lost that election because I'm not exactly what the county code is right now, but to have an annexation, to be able to annex unincorporated Miami-Dade County, you need to have less than, I believe, 500 residents in that area. Mm-hmm. The area that they were annexing had a lot more than 500 residents, so it went to a referendum. And obviously the residents voted, hey, we don't want to pay more taxes, we don't want to be Sweetwater, so they voted it down. So we got the opportunity to package that annexation again and sell it correctly. Obviously we cut out some areas. There's some areas that didn't want to become Sweetwater, and we understood. When you're part of a local municipality, you pay more in taxes, but you receive a lot more services. Yeah. Sometimes that's hard to sell, right? People don't want to pay more. So
what was the selling point?
So the selling point was, what's your response time now? If you call the police now, how long does it take for Miami-Dade County to come there? And in many of these areas, the response times were longer than 20, 25 minutes. Wow. So that was a huge selling point. And then the other selling point was, hey, you're going to have your own building department. Instead of having to go to Miami-Dade County, right, and to see a mayor that you're never going to see, right? You're going to wait in line, you're going to do this, you're going to have open door policy, you're going to be able to speak to a strong mayor, and at the same time, we're going to have a building department satellite office within that area. And that was a great selling point, especially for the commercial folks. Mm-hmm. And then the residential, we always serviced a certain portion of the city already, right? So those people felt they identified themselves already as Sweetwater. So we had the vote in a certain area. We just didn't have it in another. And then we worked with Miami-Dade County to cut the boundaries differently than the first annexation. And then we were able to carry it out. And finally, we ended up winning that. And I believe that happens, you know, it's been such a long time, but I believe that happened sometime in 2010. We got that annexation approved. So that was amazing. The city budget went from like $5-6 million a year to over $20 million.
And that was overnight?
Overnight. Overnight that happens, and you can imagine that changed completely the trajectory of the city. You know, we were definitely going in a different
And that was just a starting point.
That, along with the combination of redevelopments, is what really speared Sweetwater to what it is today.
Because a lot of developers are going to want to go to, for example, unincorporated Miami-Dade and have to wait, you know, the permitting process.
Correct.
all these other things that, at Miami Dade, it may take longer than if it was a smaller
Correct.
city.
What I can tell you is City of Sweetwater, their building department is extremely efficient, right? It's dedicated just to that area that's surrounding it. So they could act a lot faster than Miami-Dade County. So that was a huge selling point,
Yeah.
Especially when, as you said, when you're trying to get a permit and you're dealing with unincorporated Miami-Dade County, there's no real face behind that. City of Sweetwater, you have an issue, you go to the mayor's office. The mayor's there, the mayor responds, he's a resident of the city. So it's much easier.
Okay. And you were involved you started getting involved once you guys annexed it. And after annexing, now on the real estate side, did you leave the city? Did you leave City Hall?
Of course. So I learned land use, zoning, and I learned the parts of the government process when I worked for government, right? I saw that front row, I understood that process well. What I didn't understand was values, how to put a deal together, understanding everything that goes beyond that. And then there's really a lot of stuff that comes along with that. So redevelopment occurs, we get our master plan amended to allow for this redevelopment sometime in 2010 as well. So both things happen concurrently.
Okay.
And then I decided to go to the private sector. I had never been in the private sector before. I had been itching to go for a long time. And I decided to get into commercial real estate and focus on the city from the private side now. And what I didn't know at the time is, it was the worst timing because we had just gone through the 2008 housing crisis. The economy was in slumps. Recession had hit everything. And going now into the private side, this was about the end of 2011, 2012. So we were in recovery. We didn't know we were quite in recovery, but it was the perfect timing because I was able to start putting properties under contract for very little money at the time, really. However, in real estate, no one wants to be the first guy in, right? At least not institutional money. Institutional money always wants to wait for the local guy to come in, figure it out, and then they're willing to pay more money for the proof of concept, right? So we started putting pieces together. 109th Tower had actually just occurred, right? So a guy by the name of Ricky Vadilla, great developer, he was the pioneer that did the first one, and then the city had granted him a no parking waiver because that's the only way that he would take the risk, right? He provided no parking, and it was that parcel of land on 109th right on 7th Terrace. So it worked. The building was fully leased with no parking, fantastic. At the end of the day, that was all we needed. We had the proof of market, and we went out there and we were able to get other developers to join in, and today you have 5 or 6 different student housing buildings all over the place,
And everybody drives by 8th Street, everybody goes to Dolphin Mall, everybody, Sweetwater has turned into, especially with Topgolf, Beacon Lakes, Sweetwater has turned into, attracting tourists, live, work, play.
Yeah. It's amazing, right? Because it's become kind of like the entertainment capital of Miami. Like you have Topgolf, you have Dolphin Mall, which at the time was like the 4th most visited place in all of Florida. You have all of that going on. You have the industrial section going on with Beacon Lakes and so forth, and then you have the college town. So you have all these uses together in the city. To me, it's spectacular because I remember what it was. Born and raised in Miami. I've frequented Sweetwater since I was a little kid, and it's amazing. A lot of people would tell me during that time, your plan, what you guys are doing is never going to work. It's never going to work. No one wants to live there. And today you could sit right outside 109th Avenue, and it's amazing the amount of students that you see walking through its sidewalks. You actually start seeing the fruition of everything we did back then, and we're still not there yet. There's still a lot of work to be done in the city. It still has to be built out completely, but you see the pieces. People see it today, and definitely its reputation has changed.
Yeah, and so you've seen Sweetwater, you've seen Miami and you've been in government for a long time now. And how have you seen specifically the real estate market, Sweetwater, Miami? How have you seen that involved within the economic shifts, 2008, 2009? How did you see the shift, and at the same time as growth happening, was that a boom of opportunity?
Well, let's start by this. I was born a long time ago, and I've seen Miami completely shift to what it is today. It's amazing. It's almost fascinating to me just how a city, in the 80s, I remember Miami being a sleepy town, right? It was not nowhere near what it is today. But slowly we've evolved into this mecca that we have people from all over the world living in the same place. It's one of the only cities really in the United States that I can think of that's so diverse.
Yeah.
We've come a long way. We have a lot of things to work on. Our traffic has definitely become an issue in my lifetime. I remember being able to get to downtown Miami within half an hour.
Wow.
You can't do that no longer during the weekdays, right? We have affordability issues. In this last cycle that we saw all these people especially from the Northeast, move on down, we've seen prices skyrocket in every single sector, from residential through multifamily, through any type of commercial property, really. So we have some issues we got to work through. I have seen government improve, and some of the leaders that we have today are truly great. We have very educated, well-versed leaders at the helm now. And I think no one would have predicted where we're here today, and all of this was caused by a lack of planning, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I think now, moving forward, we have the right leadership in the county, in our different municipalities, and I think slowly we're getting there. We're a little bit behind the 8 ball, but we're slowly improving as we move along.
Yeah, and I see, Miami has changed drastically, every municipality, and how does government play a role in that being enforced, in redevelopment? How does government play a role in making a better living for its residents?
So government plays a huge role in all of this. One of the things that I really like is the whole entire corridor down US 1 is being redeveloped. Everything along the rail has been, which the county dubs as their SMART plan, their transportation plan, has been redeveloped. It's something that really should have been in place for a long time now. But the problem with the government, it works a little slower. It has to see the problems come out for them to react to it. But I've seen that corridor improve over time. I've seen redevelopment, and going back to your question, government has the ability to designate certain areas as their high density areas, right? These are the areas that we want people to live. This makes sense. This is where the people that work in downtown should live so they could commute back and forth seamlessly, right, through Metro Rail.
Yeah.
I would like to see the city more united in terms of a transportation plan. I think we've made major steps through the CITT, through the trolley systems that almost every city has. They're linked, but I still think we need to see rail somehow connecting Homestead, South Dade, all the way to downtown Miami, and somehow we need to connect the east and west corridor. Right? There still needs to be a plan on how to bring Metro Rail from the airport all the way to either Sweetwater, Dolphin Mall, or FIU in that area. Yeah. I think once we have those two connections, that's going to be key. I think that will alleviate traffic and technology overall. Autonomous cars, that's something that we also have to take a look at and see how we could, as government, apply right policies to basically subsidize some of our transportation systems.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mayor Danielle Cava is a big proponent for the transportation system, right?
Yes, in essence, she is, and I think she's been a good mayor. However, I think there needs to be more done. Transportation is something that's so costly. It takes so much time. It takes so much planning. We still don't have the right building blocks. We need to see more of that. We need to see a more focus. We need to see a more focus on transportation and affordability. That's what's really affecting every single household today. And I still don't think, whether it's county government or even at the municipal level, that we've done enough But I think we have the right leadership in place to start doing something about it today.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to government and developers, local developers, coming together to go towards that.
Of course,
the same goal.
of course. Developers have an incentive, right, for their projects to be connected or linked via transportation. It makes their projects a lot more attractive.
I think Terra is doing Grand Central Station.
Yes.
The underlined.
Yes.
That's kind of tied into transportation towards green space where transportation is needed. And
Of course. David Martin understands those concepts, and his projects always incorporate those angles. We just need everybody to buy into the same program at the end of the day. But let me ask you a question. Could I ask questions on this podcast too? So what have you seen in Miami since you've been? Your story is also you're a native here in Miami, born and raised.
Correct.
What has impressed you the most in your lifetime here in Miami? Where have you seen the most growth? What do you think we're doing right? What do you think we're doing wrong?
I think just like you said, we have the leadership in place because I've seen in various developers, I've seen in various leaders in each municipality, for the most part, right? Nobody's perfect, but heading in that direction of making a place where you can live, work, play, and live and go to school with. And I've seen an effort with ties in cities, and I've seen that play and come to fruition. Now I have seen growing up, I have seen a big redevelopment areas in areas like, for example, on the west side, industrial developments coming in places that you would never think would happen.
Different areas that you would have never thought that type of use would have been there in the future.
For example, I'm gonna play out this development project in Doral, Bridgepoint, Doral,
right?
Which that thing was vacant, over 100 acres. I forgot the exact count. You would never think that a whole industrial park is gonna come out there.
Right.
You would think that would be a mixed use commercial or homes. In Doral, as packed as it already is now, you're gonna have giant 52 trailers.
A big bomber, as they like to call it,
and with already the Doral traffic, which is insane. And just like that, there's also different developments in other municipalities.
Absolutely, and talking about Doral, you just brought that conversation up. It's funny because when I was a kid, Doral was completely agricultural, cow fields everywhere, and for Doral to become what it is today is just fascinating to me. It's to me it's where commerce takes place, really, next to the airport, logistically in a great location. But its residents are also complaining, right, about the traffic. How could we get the traffic away from the city or calm traffic down? And really, that's what we got to concentrate, not only in Doral, in all of Miami-Dade County. So I think what needs to take place is a lot of municipalities really got to take a look at their zoning codes and realize that we're not going to be able to be the same old Miami. We're going to have to go vertical at some point. There's a lot of municipalities that have resisted going vertical, and I understand they don't have the infrastructure, the residents don't want it, it's not popular. But we ain't turning back the clock. Miami's a different place, and unfortunately, or fortunately, it's never going to go back. So we got to make it the best it could be moving forward. And
there's markets like Wynwood, Alapata. 10 years ago, you would never think that in Wynwood you're gonna have luxury multifamily.
Exactly. It's Wynwood to me.
Or projects in Alapata, workforce housing in Alapata. Same thing. Right?
Alapata's not there yet, but you're right. It's close.
You have Lisette Calderon building.
Lisette's been building a lot of things out there. She's spearheading, I think, the Alapata development in the riverfront, right? Yeah. Wynwood is one of those markets I've seen that's completely shocked me. I remember trying to avoid Wynwood in the late '90s because Wynwood was a dangerous place. Yeah. You could definitely get in some trouble there if you were there at the wrong time. And Wynwood is where everyone wants to go, and that's where the cool restaurants, the trendy spots are at. Everybody's going to Wynwood. So that's one place that's definitely shocked me. It's what South Beach, I think, was for us growing up in the 80s or early 90s, that's what it's become. It's become this just huge tourist destination, and even a native destination.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, Sweetwater as far, and Wynwood alike has, you know, done something similar.
Pretty similar, yeah.
In wanting to redevelop this with a different lifestyle, have given residents a different lifestyle and bringing in residents. Right,
correct. You know, what Sweetwater is doing is basically it's gone from having, you know, Sweetwater is more of a family community.
Yeah.
And now
it's nothing like Wynwood.
It's nothing like Wynwood, and now it's been accepting the demographics of students going to FIU. So there's, you know, a large portion of the population now is 18 to 25 years old. Mm-hmm. You know, it rivals some of their elderly population now. So as they keep building student housing, as they keep making newer places, more youth is going to move into the area. Yeah. And it's also attracted a lot of like trendy restaurants and establishments that people on the west side of Miami-Dade County could go and hang out with their families, right? Yeah. The issue with the west has, you know, before Doral or Sweetwater or any of these places we're talking about, there was really nowhere to go if you lived out west. You had to always commute out east to go to the restaurants that you like, to go to the places that you would hang out. And that's changing. You know, we're becoming a city that's going to have different downtown areas, let's call it, you know, different activity nodes all throughout. So I think we're headed in the right direction, and with the right leadership, I think we're going to get to where Miami needs to be. But we're fairly a new city too, yeah. So let's keep that in mind, right? Miami's not an old city whatsoever. We don't have New York or Chicago's, you know, history. Let's be honest, we're completely new, and we were basically a swamp a little over 100 years ago.
Yeah. And you see Ken Griffin, Stephen Ross going all in on South Florida. Miami.
It's amazing, right? What Stephen Ross coming down here and bringing some of his, you know, focusing his attention really on South Florida, to me is amazing. And Ken Griffin, with the major investments he's made all over the city of Miami, that's another amazing thing we have going for us, you know. And that's only going to attract more and more people to come down. You know, they see these two leaders doing this. It's they're not the last ones that are going to be coming down. We're going to have definitely an influx of powerful leaders coming down here.
Yeah. So Miami has a bright future. Now, back to you. You're a land broker, right? Just like I am a commercial broker, transact real estate transactions. So you've been transacting in real estate since early 2012, right?
Since 2012, yeah.
Okay. And what has been, or if you could touch upon the project over in Beacon Lakes, it was an industrial project. Kind of, if you're able to break down the project, break down that whole deal structure.
Yeah. It was not very complicated. So working in government.
Okay.
When you work in government, I'm going to say you have a know-how on where to look, or what to watch, or what to pay attention to, and you know, the evaluation appraisal report, the EAR report from the county had just come out, and in that report, basically, it's almost kind of like a business plan for the county on every single sector, on everything, and one of them is lands, and they were staff. Which it's very powerful what staff says, right? Yeah. Staff was at the time saying that they had a deficiency in industrial lands. And there was an area in Beacon Lakes that was outside of the UDB. It didn't make sense because the UDB wrapped all around it, right? The UDB is the urban boundary line of development. Yeah. So outside of that line you can't develop, inside you can. So there was something known as the hole in the donut, which was this specific area in Beacon Lakes, and you had development all around it. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. County staff is saying, hey, we should bring this into the UDB, and we should promote industrial development in this area because we have a deficiency countywide. So that's all I needed to see. All I did was watch a public meeting, read a report, and that gave me enough information. But sometimes, and it's not their fault, government's just not transparent. It's not like they go on the news and say these things, right? So you have to kind of find it through documents and through watching public meetings.
Attending commission meetings.
attending commission meetings, attending staff meetings, you know, it's all public record, right? It's all broadcast right for you. You just have to find it. So I found this, I saw it, and I was like, okay, so county wants to bring this into the UDB. They want industrial. I picked up the phone and I started calling some of the largest industrial REITs in the country. You know, no one knew what I was talking about, obviously. It was like some crazy guy from Miami calling them, saying that he has something for them. Whatever. Finally, this guy, I'm not going to say his name, but from this very big industrial REIT, said, I think I know what you're talking about. I'll be in Miami next week. Let's meet up. Got together, loved it, understood it. We put it under contract. I believe it was like a month or two after that. It was, at the time, it was 20 or 30 acres. I don't recall exactly the amount. And sure enough, county voted on it a year later. You know, these deals do take a long time. Year and a half later, the deal got done, and the hole in the donut now became part of, it became included into the area that you could develop. And sure enough, these people put it under contract. They rezoned it to an industrial use, and they built, I believe it was over 200,000 square feet of industrial real estate on it, which sits there today. So that was a perfect point of seeing something that the county was recommending, the staff, something happening, and basically almost predicting the future just by reading government reports and watching meetings.
Yeah. Okay.
Something anyone could do.
I mean, that project was, you know, presented to the city before you know, breaking ground.
Right. So the process was the city brought this land into, right, and they took it out of the UDB and brought it into an area that they could develop. They brought it to the UDB before the offer came in? No, we had the offer on it, contingent upon it coming to the UDB, but it was black and white. Once staff says something, it's likely going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and it was brought in, and then they had to go through a whole rezoning, a land use amendment, or a rezoning process, which was given because it was already brought into UDB, and it was done.
And typically, how long does that rezoning take?
So it depends. It depends where you're doing it. It depends on the municipality, and even in the county, it depends on the areas, right? In this case, it took about 6 months because it was pretty simple, right? But in certain places, it could take from 6 months to a year to 2 years. It depends how contentious the application is.
Hey guys, thank you for watching. Unfortunately, we ran out of footage. It got cut short. But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you guys took something out of it. If even just one small thing, please make sure to comment, like, subscribe. Give me your comments. What would you like to see? What do you like? What don't you like? Here for you guys. Thank you so much. God bless you.